Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics like wealth creation strategies, investment principles, creating passive income, paying off your debt faster, and much, much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host,
Andrew. Bills, we're back again for another podcast, and we're also joined by another guest as well.
That's correct, Andrew, and I'd like to introduce Romy Schustin from PRP Valuers. Romy, nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. Can't wait to have the chat. You know, I know you guys are really good on the finance side of things, and as we know, it has big implications on the property market. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a very timely conversation that we're going to have today. You want to tell us a little bit about you and what it is that you do and what PRP do as well?
Yeah. So I'm a residential property valuer. I've been in the business for nearly 5 years now. I've got a pretty good background in property. My dad's a developer, so I had a good exposure from a young age into a lot of the sort of unit apartment developments. At the moment, valuing pretty much all types of residential property. There's a good diverse mix in the eastern suburbs, which is where I'm predominantly working. But I love it. You know, every property's different and unique and requires different types of work to find the value. I love it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It'd be maybe a little bit more challenging now than what it has been sort of in the early years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's about understanding the market, seeing the market trends. That's a big part of being a valuer, analysing trends. I guess a lot of valuers are known to be conservative in their approach. So definitely being conservative is part of our job, but establishing your valuation range, probably going on the bottom end of the range is what you should do in this type of market. But it's about just being careful with your sales and really analysing every sale and seeing if there's any market trends. Yeah,
and I imagine at the moment, because things are moving so quickly, and also, we were touching on it before we sort of jumped on the podcast, that there are markets within markets. So how do you approach, your valuation methodology, just to give us a bit of a deeper insight? Because from our perspective as financial planners and with our mortgage broking business as well, you request a valuation, you're kind of like keeping your fingers crossed going, is it going to come out the way that we need it to? What are some of the things that you go through? What's your valuation methodology? And I imagine it's sort of consistent across the industry, but what does it look like? Give us a bit of a insider's guide to the world of residential valuations.
Yeah, so the methodology we predominantly use is the direct comparison approach. So that's looking at your comparable sales, finding a valuation range and adopting a number within your range with your sales. So you've got to do your due diligence with every single sale, every property you inspect. And as well as that, you can also use the summation approach. So we use that as sort of a check or secondary method. Depending on your location, if you're in a location where there's, you're further away from the city or in the growth corridor, summation is probably an approach that you tend to use, which is pretty much your land plus improvement value. But your direct comparison approach is more or less, finding that sort of building or land rate with each sale, and that's pretty much what I do with each property. You've got to be really careful with each one. Let's say for example you're in McKinnon and you're in McKinnon secondary zone. Your property might be worth $200,000 to $400,000, like more than the ones that are outside of the zone. So it's more about establishing the correct and accurate rate and applying it to your property.
Yeah, amazing. And look, I guess one of the big questions that I'm sure a lot of our listeners and I know a lot of our clients kind of want to know is what's happening, what are you seeing in the property market, what's happening in the market at the moment, is it as doom and gloom as what the media is portraying, is it not quite so doom and gloom, does it depend, which I'm sure it's going to be the answer that
probably not as bad as what the media are reporting, to be completely honest, depending on your location. So as we were saying before, there are certain sub-markets in major markets. Certain sub-markets are performing quite poorly. Some are doing better than expected. For example, I went on an auction about a week ago, the property went 150 grand more than what I valued it. So that shows, and that was in Caulfield. So sort of your blue chip suburbs are still performing quite well. The purchase capacity probably isn't affecting that consumer as much, but then you sort of move out, 30, 40 minutes away from the city, these properties are definitely coming down. We're seeing trends. Depending on your suburb, every suburb performs differently. You've got different, demographics and, but yeah, that ends up coming down to, looking at the right sales and seeing the trends. I keep talking about the trends, but it's really important in this type of market, yeah. But yeah, I guess overall, your prestige market's performing quite well. The property's sort of 2 mil plus in value. The reason being probably because people are probably more cashed up purchasing those properties, so finance isn't affecting them as much, but certainly in that sort of 1.5 below bracket, we've seen a downwards trend the past 12 months, yeah.
Yeah, and that's common with the experience that we've been seeing as well too. I guess another question that I'm thinking that could potentially be on everybody's mind as well too. Obviously, a big part of the valuation process is looking at comparable sales and looking at what that looks like. And I respect that a lot of that has to do with the square meterage of the land and the suburb and what have you.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you can do? Obviously, it's different for auction day versus valuation.
Yeah.
But as a homeowner, as a property owner, is there anything that you can do to help increase the valuation when it comes to what you guys look for in terms of your craft and what you're doing day in and day out?
Yeah, offer the valuer a coffee when he comes in, and you might get a better valuation.
It's as simple as that.
There's a few things. I mean, it really depends on the property at hand. So we're really seeing renovated product compared to sort of that dated original product performing way better. So if there's any room for renovations in your property, let's say it was built sort of 80s, 90s, and it's in its original condition, could be in good condition, but dated, that's going to sell far less than what a fully renovated place would be. So, if you could even renovate a bathroom, or if you start even one room at a time, depending on your budget, that's going to help any valuation. You just got to think logically at the end of the day. If I put this work into my property and I put it on the market, would someone pay more for it? And a lot of the time, yes. I get clients asking me, if I install all these solar panels, will that increase my value of my property? Probably not. It's probably not so important in Melbourne. I don't know if you really get your return on solar here, but in a place like Queensland, you could. But yeah, it's about putting the money into the right thing. So if you can really increase the quality of your place, let's say update your bench tops, cabinetry, flooring, that would be very expensive, but it would definitely in turn raise your property value. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's similar. Once again, that's similar to the experience that we're seeing in our business as well too. Is that those properties that are literally turnkey and are going for more? There's obviously more competition. There's more interest. And I guess for me, in terms of the experience that I've seen, it's really twofold. Firstly, it's the cost associated with the renovations. Obviously,
very
that is what it is.
Right now.
But it's the availability and I guess the difficulty of getting tradespeople and managing tradespeople.
Yeah.
So it's also that, and people just, the truth is, it's difficult and it's challenging unless you're in the field. But people can't be stuffed with it. So I think that detracts as well when you look at a property and it's like, geez, work needs to be done. Actually, I can't be bothered with needing to get the bathroom done because it's going to be expensive and it's hard to get tradies because they're so busy at the moment. Yeah. So that's what
the
I'm
other
seeing
thing
from
as
mine.
well is, when you consider the purchaser on the opposite end of the property, let's say, the property might be worth $1 million and you need to put $100,000 worth of renovation into it. I'll exclude stamp duty from the calculation just so that it's an easy number. If you're purchasing $1 million property and you need to put an extra $100,000 into it, you need a $200,000 deposit if you want to do it at 20%. And then on top of that, you also need to have another $100,000 available for renovations. Whereas if you're buying a $1.1 million property and you're just putting a 20% deposit, you just need $220,000. So if you don't need to put money into it, the purchaser can also, take a loan essentially on the renovation costs and not need to fund all of that money up front. So it becomes a more attractive proposition.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, it does. It's funny because I've been speaking to certain agents at opens at the moment, and my brother, he's in construction, so he does all the costings for Ironside. So for him, buying something with potential is probably part of his investment plan. So from what we're being told, a lot of purchasers are scared of renovating. So they're not even considering these older properties. So I'd recommend anyone with a construction background or that feels actually comfortable project managing their own sort of mini developments or projects to go for those older products because they're going at a discount generally at the moment. So I'm seeing sort of scenarios where you could put 150 grand into a reno and it'll raise your property's value 2 to 250 overall. So you could end up taking equity out, reinvesting it in other ways, which you guys would know all about.
Yeah, amazing. And so on that topic, in terms of increasing the valuation or making more money out of your property, what do you look for? Like, what defines a good quality asset, a good quality property that you expect is going to increase more in terms of valuation versus another property that might be not quite so good in terms of purchasing a quality asset?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, it comes down to attention to detail as well. So with your renovation, you don't necessarily just want to go cheap because consumers see that. So if you're going to, let's say upgrade all the bench tops in your house, actually spend a bit more, go for the 40 mil rather than 20 mil. It looks better and consumers think it looks a lot more expensive. So even though you might do a cosmetic reno at times, it actually looks nice. So consumers will be, they'll be willing to spend more. On top of that, I mean, it depends what type of reno you're doing. If you change the floor plan, add another bedroom, this is really appealing. From what we know on realestate.com, one of the main things people search at the moment are studies or three-bedders at the moment. So if you have wriggle room, you've got the bones of a good house where you've got a lot of building area and you've got enough sort of money to change the floor plan a bit, that could really raise the value as well. The problem is having cash and being liquid these days.
Yep. Robbie, another question that I've got, and I could never put my finger on it, but different valuation types, and maybe my knowledge is a little bit naive here or limited, but you've got the full valuation where you go into the property and do the inspection.
Full inspection.
Full inspection, the curbside, and then the desktop. They're probably the three that I know of.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, in the name it suggests what they are, but how do you differentiate as a valuer when you need to do which one? What does that look like?
Yeah, I recommend everyone to go full valuation personally, because you can't really appreciate a property via a desktop. For example, I'll get it, and this happens every day, I'll get someone ordering a desktop and I don't know what the inside looks like. I'd have to assume what it looks like. So if someone's spent a bit of money on a renovation or done a bit of work, cleaned it up, that presents a lot better. So if I'm just assuming things, it can actually almost come out inaccurate. So I'd suggest anyone that's done any work to their property, even landscaping, definitely get a full valuation. Curbside is sort of similar to desktop in terms of you're just driving by the property. And then you've sort of got to get as much research as you can online, which there's usually a lack of research for most properties, unless they've had recent marketing the past sort of couple years. It's tough. So I always recommend full inspection. I mean, if you own a property which is derelict and gutted, order the desktop because I won't know what it looks like. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, desktop is, you get your data from RP Data online. You check your sort of land area, building area, and you've just got to assume that all of that information is accurate. Whereas a full inspection is, me checking everything, measuring the building, looking at the finishes, making notes of the accommodation, noting down what type of landscaping there is, understanding the accommodation and everything. So it's a way more detailed assessment.
And look, there's probably a few instances where, someone will get a valuation, or you'll go out and do a valuation. But I guess one of the ways that happens is when you're going through the process of either purchasing or refinancing. But if someone wants to do a valuation because they're either moving out of a owner-occupied property, it's becoming an investment, and they want to do a valuation on it, or just want to know what their property is worth, can they reach out to a company like you and order a valuation on their own, or does it only have to be done through the bank side of things? Or
yeah, so definitely can order through it. If you're getting it for sort of private purposes, pre-auction purposes, just to understand the value, they're generally a bit more expensive. But if you were to sort of order it through the bank for mortgage purposes, that's the way that most people do it. Most standard reports are anywhere from sort of $200 to $300. But if you're ordering it privately, there's I think firms tend to charge more, so you may as well order it through the bank. Yeah.
And in terms of doing a valuation, I mean, how long does it take you? Your average size home, I mean, obviously it's different depending on what size property and stuff, but how long does it take you, and what do people get out of the back if they are coming directly to a valuer?
Yeah, it's every property is a mixed bag. I mean, if it's your standard single level project home out in the growth corridor, my inspection could be 10 to 15 minutes, so it doesn't take too long. Some valuers take a bit longer. I personally, I have quite a few inspections a day, and I don't really want to be late to my appointments, so I found a good rhythm to be faster, about 10 to 15, but a 2-level home could be sort of 20, 25 minutes, and a fully architecturally designed home with curved edges and all of that could take an hour. So each inspection's different. In terms of the actual valuation process, after the inspection where most of the work is done, looking for your sales, that every property is different as well. If it's your growth corridor one, probably will take an extra 15 minutes, so not too long. But let's say you're out in Glen Iris inspecting an architecturally designed property on a big block, that could take you hours. Yeah, it's just about taking your time and picking the right sales. Yeah.
I guess one of the other questions that a lot of people have is, if I want to buy a property, if I want capital growth, which is usually what most people are purchasing property for, are you sort of seeing the growth is coming more from apartments, from places that are a house that are built on larger land? What's the methodology for property investors when it comes to that sort of thing?
It's a really good question. I think the detached market performs a lot better. So from the last 10 years with apartments, I've seen a lot of scenarios, and this happens weekly, where I've seen someone purchase it off the plan, for example, in 2014, and I'm still valuing it less than what they purchased it off the plan. So apartments don't perform too well on a capital growth perspective. On a yield perspective, rent-wise, the rental market's booming. So those apartments are actually yielding well, but they're not getting your capital growth. In terms of other property types, when I bought my first property with my partner a couple of years ago, we're very limited with our purchase capacity. We were only able to buy up to about $750. And I sort of analysed the market, and I thought, okay, what has potential to grow? As I was saying, the semi-detached market, so your villa units of the world, anything even that has a garage, people use them for storage or even convert them into studies, which is we see a lot these days. But your apartment market's probably not doing so well. Your townhouse and established market units, they all get capital growth in a good market. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially looking at, I imagine there's the factor, because it's got land associated with it, and then looking at particular features of a suburb. You were talking about McKinnon with the school zone, seems to be quite a famous one that everybody knows about, that adds a couple of $100,000 just because you're in a particular school zone. Yeah.
It's funny because they extended the school zone, I think it was last year or the year before, and there were parts of Murrumbeena that were in the zone, and just behind Oasis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the suburb, and those properties overnight went up, I think, $300,000-400,000 grand, which is pretty crazy. So if you're owning there, you'd be very happy. But it's really important to know the suburb and know what you're buying. You don't want to waste your time as a potential purchaser out there and put all these properties in your tab, which you're going to inspect on the weekend but might be priced out on. I would actually suggest that if you're sort of looking in those areas, there are websites where you can see if your property is located in that zoning. So there's findmyschool.net. So if you're around sort of the Bentley area and McKinnon, definitely pop that in your browser, because you might go to your open and the agent's telling you the range is here and you're below the range. You don't want to waste your time. So there are definitely things that the consumer can do to speeden up the process and delineate what falls in their purchase range or not. But yeah, school zones are very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Probably the other thing on my mind, just because we've had it a few times, we'll get a valuation done as part of a purchase, and the valuation is short or less than what we think, and then the thing that we tend to do is you order a second valuation with a different company, or if you've got enough data, you go back.
That's exactly what Romy wants to hear.
No, and no, of course, right? But this is the whole point. I feel like we're getting educated here along with our listeners and our viewers. The methodology that sits behind it, obviously there's some science and there's some art as well too. And I imagine that could explain the difference between, one valuer's number and another valuer's number. Do you come across this in terms of, valuation comes up and it's like, yep, someone else has looked at it? Does that come across your desk, or is it just you do your thing and that's the end of it? Or we're just trying to get a deeper insight into how the industry works?
It happens a lot. So you've got two options. Let's say if you're not happy with your valuation, you've got two options. You can either order another valuation, or B, query the valuation. If you really think that it's come lower, the best thing that you can do to place yourself for the valuer to potentially raise their market value is provide them sales. Actually give them evidence to show them, why the property would be worth more. Rather than saying you think it's worth more, you want to give them some concrete evidence. Now, as a valuer, I guess our job is to be a reflection of the market. So the report we produce needs to show the market trend and establish and justify why we valued it. So that's why we provide certain sales. Now, it can be subjective because a lot of valuers will have a different opinion on what property is worth, but generally valuers get sort of within 5 to 10% of each other, you find. So it can be funny. I've had reports where another valuer's had 200 grand difference in value to me, which is quite substantial, but it can come down to your perspective of what you see in the market. So as long as you can justify it from a valuer, then you'd feel pretty comfortable with the figure you adopt.
Yeah. And I guess most people, or from our end, you're putting an indicative valuation before it gets submitted for evaluation. Does that have any bearing whatsoever? Like if you tell
the estimated value,
if you say that your estimated value is 1.5 and the property is nil, does it change?
I'll be completely honest. So I most of the time don't even look at the estimated value.
I thought that might have been your answer.
And the reason being is a big part of our profession is not to add any bias. So there's no conflict of interest. There's no bias. You've got to come into everything with a blank canvas, and paint the story. So I find that I would rather go into something without knowing what the estimated value is and just looking at the sales and let them do the talking. But then again, I have seen estimated values that are a bang on. So most of the time they're higher than the market value. So I know a lot of people aren't fans of valuers because we're generally on the conservative side, but you've got to understand, even me as a valuer, I probably overvalue my properties that I own because I only see it in a positive light. I only compare it to the good properties when there might be another one or two sales nearby that would suggest, it's actually lower than what I anticipated. So you've got to, it generally comes in lower than the estimate. It doesn't really, no.
Yeah, I guess there's a theory when you submit it and you put the price a little bit higher, thinking no, let them pull it down rather than
exactly.
try and push it up. Yeah, absolutely.
We have a bit of a laugh sometimes as valuers. You know, someone will put an estimate of 2.4, this has happened, and then I'll value at 1.5. You know, that's a big difference, but I've seen it happen quite often. So sometimes you'll have a bit of a laugh or cringe, but that's, you know, you've got to take the good with the bad in the industry, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ah, awesome.
Andrew?
I think that that covers it pretty well. Thank you very much for coming in, Romy. It was, definitely very insightful.
No worries. Happy to chat anytime. And it was great. It was a good chat. You know, other things for potential people to note are the rental market. People in Melbourne and Carlton, you know, these suburbs are the most searched suburbs in the rental market at the moment as per realestate.com. So keep an eye for that, because we're getting a 40,000 population injection from China. Mostly students, I assume. So, but otherwise, good to see you guys, good to chat, and it was a good one.
Yeah, awesome. Romy, thank you. And to our listeners and our viewers, if you want to get in contact with Romy or need any of his details will be in the show notes as always. Andrew, like and subscribe.
Yes, definitely. If you enjoyed the episode, like, subscribe, and we look forward to catching you on the next one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we've talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
Just a reminder to our listeners that the information contained in this podcast is general in nature and it is not intended as personal recommendations for the audience. Please consider whether the information suits your circumstances before acting on it. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of AMP Financial Planning.